Okay. Hello, I'm Clint. I speak English. If I talk too fast, please tell me. I get excited, and I know when English isn't your native language, when someone in a different language speaks very fast, it's hard to understand. Just, someone raise and tell me to slow down, and I'll happily slow down. I work best in Q&A scenarios, so I'll be showing off Windows Template Studio, which is a project I helped build. One of our sister projects that Shen and Nicola and a bunch of the community members have built out called Windows Community Toolkit. And actually I have a new toy that the Windows team is helping build out, which is basically, they're called dev setup scripts. A couple people have built these before, and what we're trying to do is basically create one repository that you guys can pass in a couple args to, and with a single click, set up a new PC. So, because setting up a new PC takes some time, I'm going to demo that actually first. And that's the URL at the bottom there. It's github.com/Microsoft/Windows DevBox Setup Scripts. So, I'm going to go pop over there really quick. You can see this URL, hey, about this project. But if I wanted to kick this off, all I need to do is click that single URL. So because I already have my current system set up, I'm going to go into a virtual machine. This is a brand new install of April 2018 update. And this is actually a sister branch, a branch that I helped create to try to break up the scripts. So, famous last words, this may work, this may not work, because I checked in code literally before we came here. But literally, I'm going to click this script. It's going to install Azure workload. It's going to install the UWP workload. Git, it's going to download the UWP samples. It's going to install Windows Template Studio, and we're working on adding in more stuff as well. So you can see right there, it just said, hey, open this file. It's going to launch a click once app called Boxster. We're going to click OK. Once that fully downloads, it's going to do an elevated admin prompt. And then with that single click, it's going to kick off all this process in the background. So I feel sorry for your Wi-Fi right now, because I'm going to download about 20 gigs worth of stuff. So while that's currently downloading, I'm going to move this over here. So please tell me when that finishes. I'm going to go transition into the other things. So how many people know what Windows Template Studio is? Okay, so three people. So what Windows Template Studio is one of the fastest ways you can create a file new application. There's times where you want to know best practices. There's times where you just need to build a new project and need to get up and going faster. So the team I work on, we get a bunch of research and user data, and one of the even today with the dev survey that went out last month or 2 months ago, project templates is typically either the number 2 or the number 3 ask. So what we did was we decided, could we programmatically create a file new template? And the answer is yes. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio, and I think just showing it off will actually be a bit more powerful. So once you install the VisX file, you get this new little addition called Windows Template Studio in your file new. You click OK. And what we do is we launch a wizard. And this wizard, you're given four basic options. The first one is, what is your project type? So do you want it to be a navigation pane, a blank, or a pivot tab? Now, we're also adding in menu bar when the new Windows UI library comes out. So we figured out a bunch of design patterns for that. For this scenario, let's pick navigation pane. Just click next. Now, let's add in your design pattern. What framework do you guys want? Do you want MVVM Lite, Prism, Caliburn? If you're unsure what MVVM Lite is, you can click details, you can see it. You can say, hey, well, I'm taking MVVM Lite. MVVM Lite has a license, so you can see it right down there. In addition, you can see you adopted the license right there. And click Next. This is kind of now where Template Studio will, put the pedal to the metal. In a couple clicks, we can start adding in. Yep, this just finished. So transition here back to the VM. So I'm going to click Yes, and you're going to launch. Now you can start seeing some PowerShell execute. Okay? This is going to take a while because now it's going to actually install Visual Studio. So I'm just going to migrate this over here so you guys can see stuff. Transitioning back to Template Studio now. We currently have 11 pages and we're adding in a couple more in the next release. So let's go add in a settings page. Let's go add in 2 master details. Let's rename the master detail to you guys go Roma tourist locations. Let's go add in a teller control and web view. Now let's go make our Rome thing be the first thing that pops up so you can reorder all these. I'm going to click Next. Let's go add in analytics. So with a single click, suspend and resume. Let's add in deep linking support. And let's do a first time run prompt. So you can see here are all the licenses I just took. And all I need to do is click Create. So it's going to take about 1 minute because I'm pegging my CPU. You're going to have a file new project that will be fully robust, best code, uses fluent design patterns. With all the external frameworks, we partner directly with the framework makers. So Laurent, Brian Lagunas, and I'm blanking on who runs, Nigel runs MVVM Cross. So we partner directly with them to be sure what the template is that we generate is best code, and they've approved everything. So here you can see that it's adding projects and probably going to be downloading a couple NuGets. So because that may take a bit, let's create a project that has already been created. Let's go here. So this is a project I literally just created a couple seconds ago. So you look at your source code. This is code behind the MVVM framework. Oh. Oops. Actually, no. I can just show the project we just generated. So let's do our home page. Code looks just like you'd expect from an MVVM Lite project. View models. Let's go F5 this so you can actually see the code. In addition, we say it's a file new. It's not a complete app. So you guys are developers. You have developer to-dos. So if you pick the map page, you have to go add in your map key. So we tell you exactly where to go. So if I click, let's go right here. This is our sample data service, and you can say we have a giant to-do. Hey, this is sample data. Get rid of it. I think this is an excuse to my boss to give me a more powerful laptop. So here you can see I have my first time run prompt. You can see the Laura Imsum text. I'm going to click OK. And see, here's our basic master detail page. And we picked the Roma tourist locations. So if I grab like the teller control, it's going to plug in the teller data control. You guys are the developers. You know what data you want. But this is a boilerplate system, so we give you something that then you can run with. So our goal is that you guys pretty much have to delete as few lines of code as possible. Does anyone use the with Windows Phone or Windows 8 or even the WPF samples before, where you'd have to remove like 30 to 50% of the code just to make it work with what you wanted? Yes? No? I always had to do that. And then I would break it horribly and then have to spend half the day rebuilding it. So with Windows 10, there were no templates because people complained so much about the other templates. So they went way too far. So our hope is we found that happy medium where you guys don't have to delete a lot of code. And we also added in a bunch of helper settings. So if you pick a settings page, you can see here, we provide theming support. So this is OS level theming for your application. So because I have the light theme on my OS, not the dark theme selected, the application automatically defaulted to it. But your user may want dark mode in your application. So we actually built a theming service over everything. You guys can override it. If you want to do a custom one and make it, white, red, and green, you can. It's up to you. Let's see. Okay, you can see it's still kicking off. Right now it's doing Windows updates because Windows loves to update. Is Visual Studio installed yet? Nope. So that's Template Studio. It's an open source project. It's on GitHub. Some of our best features have been from the community. So one of the crazier ones is we are fully VB compliant. So if you guys are Visual Basic developers, we can generate file news in VB as well. In addition, you can say, you look at the source code, you're like, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could break this into multi-project support? So you'd have your solution in different projects. So if you wanted to add in, maybe a web service or maybe Xamarin or WPF, you're having a base class library. We're actually proactively working at breaking all that stuff up, so then we can do things like a file new WPF, file new Xamarin as well, and then we can reuse as much of our code as possible. That is work that is probably 6 months out from now, but we are proactively working toward it. It's a lot more work than we thought it was. Any questions? Yes, sir. Pardon?
I see you in the new app.
Yeah.
There are generic grid.
Yes.
You choose to use the generic controls or embedded in the toolkit.
We use the Telerik NuGet package. So we do our best to always try to stay up to date. They may rev before we rev, but we do our best to try to stay in sync with whatever the latest is. Same thing with the Windows Community Toolkit.
And if you use a generic NuGet, you don't need a license.
When you use a NuGet package, you are actually prompted saying, here's the license you are taking a dependency on. So all we're doing is making sure you as the developer know that we are consuming a NuGet package, and you have to obey by that license as well. So that's why you saw the license very prominently displayed there and in the detail page. So we don't want to. If you use like npm and you download packages from there, same concept. You, believe it or not, take dependencies on all those licenses. And if those components use other things, you are taking dependencies on those licenses as well. So we just try to make sure that you know exactly what you are taking a dependency on when we generate something for you. Because some people may not want that. So if you are a developer and you can't use a third-party control, that is actually why we have the MVVM basic framework in there. It's my team created a very small, lightweight framework that you guys can use if you cannot use MVVM Lite, Caliburn, or Prism. Does that make sense? And This is Windows Community Toolkit. So, hey, you guys may want some additional controls. So this is their sample app. They have a NuGet package out there that you can take a dependency on. And here is, I think they have about 50 controls total. So they have things like an image extender, range selector, radial controls, gauges, staggered panel. Let's go open up the staggered panel. So let's go make our desired column with little teeny, and then I start resizing stuff, and you can see how it just auto resizes, kind of what you'd expect. They're always adding in stuff. They're adapting new stuff. If you guys are aware of the new web view control for WPF and WinForms, that's also going to be shipping in the Windows Community Toolkit as well. So, and if you were like, hey, what's the XAML to do this exact sample? They actually do some really cool stuff and provide the sample here. So just grab the staggered panel there, and that's all you need. I think that's pretty cool. So if I went back to the properties and let's say tweaked this, let's make it stretched. You can see the XAML updated as well. If you're like, hey, what's the documentation? The sample also has a deep link into the documentation. Another thing that I personally like are some of the brush helpers. So let's go make up my app acrylic, just to increase the blur. Once again, pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure with the XAML, you can actually go in and update it as well. So I just cranked it up to 20, and you can see it actually increased the opacity a lot. So if I bring it back down to 2, it does real-time updating. So you can play and tweak little by little to see what works best for you, and then bring it into your application. And this is a public NuGet. This is also a open source project, just like Windows Community Toolkit. Windows Template Studio is. They have additional developer tools. One interesting thing that they're rolling in also is, what is it called? An analyzer to verify, are you safely wrapping things that have been added into the framework? So are you adding in API contracts? So a great example would be the tree view control was added in the April 2018 update, but your min target is the, let's say, anniversary update, so RS2 to RS4. Well, you need to safely wrap that call to the tree view in an API contract. Otherwise, anyone that's down level will blow up. Does that make sense? Does that seem interesting? Okay. Sadly, Windows is still updating. Do you guys have any questions for me? Yes, sir.
You understand the issue workload?
Yeah.
But is the same that you are doing in Windows? Or what are you doing in the virtual machine? I didn't understand.
Okay, so actually here, I'll open up the script, and it will actually hopefully make a bit more sense. Okay. So I'm going to open up this script here, and let me go zoom in. And I'll walk through it line by line. First thing we do is disable the user access control. We're going to add in Hyper-V and WSL shortly, but they were causing conflicts right now, so we chose to just comment it out like any good developer. Then what we do is we tweak your File Explorer settings. I don't know about you, one of the first things I do is turn on Show Me All Extensions. And I do this over and over and over again. That's what one of those options are. We also do hidden folders and a couple other things. Next thing we do here is, what is it? I can just look down here. Line 30, then we install Visual Studio Community. You can change that to Pro or whatever. So if you want to fork this and make it your own, you can. We add in the Azure workload, and we also install Git there. Because we're installing Git, we refresh the environment. The next line is we install the UWP workload, and then we grab the GitHub samples. So we can do that because we installed Git earlier. And then once we do that, I did some magic with Fiddler and stole the how Visual Studio calls their templating or the extension service, and basically reverse engineered how to install a BizX outside of Visual Studio using the Visual Studio API. So we go grab the Windows Template Studio, the latest version, download it, install it using the BizX installer, and then we delete the installer because we're good citizens and want to clean up after after ourselves. And then we re-enable the user access control, re-enable Windows Update, and force Windows Update to install. So that's what that script does. We leverage another service called Boxster and Chocolatey to do a lot of the work. So one thing that, like I said, I'm proactively doing is working on breaking up these scripts, because every dev knows that when you have 5 or 10 scripts that do the same thing, you're cut and pasting. If one has a bug, then you have to update it, and that's bad. So now we're having, I feel slightly dirty inside saying this, but we have PowerShell scripts remotely calling other PowerShell scripts. But it works. So that's what I'm working, and that's actually what is getting executed right here on this one. So, and it really, really loves doing updates. Did that make sense? Okay. We also have one for web. I think there's a one for, let me go back. Web, Node.js, machine learning. They're going to add in Xamarin containers. And if there's other workloads, we'd love to hear it. I just filed an issue against it. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could do it through command line args and stuff, so you can literally pass in, I want Node, Azure, machine learning, and Kubernetes. And just, it works. So these are all the little things that we're playing with and seeing when do we break something too far or go too far. Yeah, it's 100% something else we could do. For MR, do you, like, what packages would you want installed there? Okay. Well, there's Unity, there's Unreal. Like, what's the permutation to make your box set up correctly? Like, I would love if you could file an issue saying, I want one for MR. Here's the stuff I install. We'll figure out how to make it work. So, because if you do like Vive, don't you need? Doesn't Vive require an SDK? Yes. Oculus requires an SDK, I believe. Yeah. Yeah. So that's where it's like, should we have one for Vive? Do we merge them? That's where the command line arguments kind of come in, where we could have like a command line argument for MR, where you could say, you know, include Oculus, include Vive, include Windows MR, include Unreal, include, like, that's, do you get what I'm saying? Because if, let's say I was only a Vive developer, I wouldn't want the Oculus stuff being installed. That's kind of where we want to make it generic, but yet we want to make it work for you. And the hope would be also that you potentially would fork this, and then it would be for your dev machine. Any other questions? You guys can ask me pretty much anything. So from a file new, what would you guys want? What could Template Studio not do for you that you guys would want? Hey, see? Look, now it's installing Visual Studio. And now we're going to have a network admin start yelling at me shortly. So let's go back to Template Studio here. Let's close the solution. So, like I said earlier, we're adding in menu bar. And then we have a couple design patterns that we're thinking about. One was, so I'm going to go actually close this out really quick. So we looked at Visual Studio and we said there's only a couple design patterns or navigation patterns you have to deal with menu bar. First one is you're kind of updating the main section, but you're not navigating away. So a great example would be if I did file new and opened up something. So let's just open up a project here. So you saw how the main section updated. The other one would be we launch a Modal Dialog. So options. So I had one page and it opened up a modal, and sadly I'm blanking on the third. I think you refresh the menu bar as well. That's the third option. So let's say I want to build and hit deploy, the entire window updates. Is there another design pattern or navigation pattern, I'm sorry, that we forgot? Did what I say make sense? Hold on. No. Here comes the dangerous thing. I'm going to open up my Notepad. And it opened up on something I didn't want to open. Nope, didn't want that. So, draw. Okay. Paint 3D? Sure. Marker. Okay, so you have your window here and you have your menu bar. And you click, let's say, the top option. Everything that's in red would be updated. Okay? Now, if I click this one, the green one, and oops, you get a new window. Like you see how the menu system would literally change. And if I click purple, you get a Modal Dialog. Does that make sense? Is there another design pattern there that we didn't think about? You're nodding your head yes. Or you disagree? Okay. So what we were thinking about doing code-wise was going back to our principle of we don't want you to have to delete unnecessary code, is we would have a navigation pattern or a navigation service. And then XAML, we'd have, menu, bar, item, command equals, update, view. I don't know if that code is actually correct, but you get the idea. Be something like this. Launch. So I forgot the other one is new window. Windowing APIs are coming in RS4. I'm sorry, RS5, which is coming out later. So those would be the four. The last one we can't do right now API-wise until RS5. But does that feel right? So we would comment out code-wise these, just so then you know from XAML how to actually call them. Past that, you're the dev, you know what you're doing. I don't want to touch your code as much as humanly possible. That way you only have to delete 3 lines of code, and you get a to-do here. Because that way then we can keep the wizard interface very, very simple. It's you guys have a developer to do. You go in, tweak things, and you're good to go. Does that make sense? Cool. Close this. Is there a framework we're missing that you guys deemed critical?
In the past, I used the template 10 that provides a basic implementation of activation and activation on navigation events, navigation events on that model.
So you know what template 10 is actually under the hood?
Template 10 they're using maybe online.
They're actually using Prism.
The actual implementation.
They are using Prism under the hood, and then. Yeah. Well, they're actually template 10 will now become. They're going to be merging the UWP version of Prism and template 10 into one another.
My question is, something like template 10 will be integrated in Windows Template Studio, or they will be in a separate project?
So Jerry Nixon runs template 10. He needs to figure out, from my viewpoint, if they are saying Prism for UWP will have all the template 10 stuff, we're technically already done then. So until they figure out what they want, I am a bit hesitant to bring a new framework online for template 10 if template 10 is going to go away because it's going to be merged in with Prism. Does that make sense? Because adding in it, we're happy to add in new frameworks. It's a lot of work because you have to support C#, VB, 10 pages, and I think about 15 different features, and then pass all our unit tests, and it adds a bit of complexity into our system. More than happy to if people want it. And we also need to get the framework maker to give us the thumbs up and willing to help us out do stuff. So. Are there any pages we're missing? So we're going to add in a couple ink pages, inking scenarios. We're going to be adding in the native data grid control as well. That's coming out in shortly. And we're probably going to add in a master detail tree view page. We think we hit majority of the scenarios, but if there's a scenario we haven't hit, that can be made into a template. Please, we're all ears. Anything? Yes? No? Okay. Let's go on to features. Are there any features we're missing? So we have VS Analytics. If you want your app to have a cool 3D object, we now have the 3D app launcher, web to app link, which is deep linking into your application. URI schema, we're going to be adding in user activity feed shortly. Setting storage, multi-view, we'll add in MultiInstance as well shortly, because those APIs came in RS4, so we'll add it in when RS5 comes in the fall. Background tasks, we have sharing and both as a source and a target. Toast notifications, Azure notifications, Dev Center notifications, live tiles, first time run prompt, what's new prompt, feedback hub, and drag and drop support. I feel like we hit a lot of the scenarios. We're going to add in, I'm going to say cloudy stuff as soon as we get multi-project working. So that would be, hey, I want to add in a web service or an Azure function. So you'd get a new project, you add that in, we wire up everything appropriately. Anything else? Your quiet makes me feel uneasy, yet confident that we did everything. As a developer, that's never a good feeling. Let's go see where this is at. So I believe this is installed now. Visual Studio, now it's installing the app, the universal package, maybe? Let's go see. So as you can see now, it has actually installed Visual Studio. So now it's installing the UWP packages, so now it's downloading the Windows SDK and all that stuff. So that's going to take a bit. And all I did was click one link also. Just remember that. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can I add you start applications like the Node Visual Studio Enterprise version?
You can install the VS Enterprise from this script. However, we will not log you in, so then it will not work until you authorize yourself. I think VS Enterprise/Pro have like a 30-day window. We opt for Community Edition because, for at least our command line right now, because you don't have to have a license for it.
And I can configure the skill.
If you wanted to fork this, you 100% can. You can add those things via Chocolatey. So Chocolatey, let me go here and here. Where's my mouse? So you can see here where it says Choco, right, the line I just highlighted. That's us calling Chocolatey, and then Chocolatey is basically like NuGet for applications. This is the best way I can describe it. So they have a bunch of pre-made packages for this. So I bet you if we went to Chocolatey, there we go. That was kind of potentially a dangerous search. You said SQL Server? So if you wanted SQL Server 20, let's go 2014, you can click that. Sure, I understand. And all you need to do is use that single line in your install script, and you're good to go. So, like I said, you can fork it. That's a great thing with open source. Fork it. You can always get the continual updates for what we're doing and keep your scripts up to date. Or you might say, this is my script and I want to lock it for this system because I have legacy systems, and when they get brought up, I just want to keep it like that. Like, once I saw this for build, Josef Durr was the PM lead on this. He's like, Clint, come here, let me show you this. And me having to set up machines continuously because insider builds and testing out new stuff, so I'm always reformatting my system. And he's like, come here, remember that thing you were complaining about? And then he shows me a VM, clicks the link, and I'm like, here's all my money, take it, I want these scripts. And then I've been working on helping tweak them and improve them, so then they work for me, and then they would work for you. And my hope is eventually you don't have to fork. You just need to know your string, and you're good to go. We haven't gotten that far yet. We just released them at build. So you can see my ever so clever breakup script. Scripts. So you saw how the prior script had install Template Studio. So this was me breaking out Template Studio into an individual script, so you could just do whatever you can use the script, update it once, so if there's ever a bug in it, and it turns out there was, that I was trying to fix today, you only have to update it in one spot. Cool. Yes, sir? Yeah.
And then you generate something.
Yeah.
The template that you choose, that you have chosen, is stored in some file with a script.
Yeah. So we actually have an entire project dedicated to this. So we have here are basically our scripts. So we go in, and then we use the Visual Studio template engine, which is another open source project. So we're open source, consuming open source, and it's happy and it's awesome. And from here, we've literally segmented out our templates. So how we basically build them out is we do a proof of concept for a new feature, and we start looking at, here, what do we need to do? What do we need to build out? And once we do that, once we figure out this is all the code we need to alter, we go in and then create start segmenting it out. So here you can start seeing, as we're diving in deeper, so this is the pages, and you can start seeing the difference between Visual Basic code behind the MVVM frameworks, and each one starts having branches outward, depending on what needs to change. So let's go add in, look at Data Grid Prism. You can start seeing, hey, okay, well, you have to add in the service, and it has a post action. So let's go look at this post action. And what we start doing then is looking at where it needs to be added in. So here it looks like we scan for public interface iData service. And when we find it, we inject in this one line of code. So we basically have a bunch of little snippets, more or less, and from there we reconstruct Humpty Dumpty, who fell off the wall. I'm not sure if that metaphor kind of resonates in Italy. It did? Okay. So, like I said, this is why adding in like a new framework is actually a large sum of work, is trying to figure out all the little random permutations. And then our goal, like I said, is when we generate a file new, and let's say we pick Prism, it looks exactly like a Prism application. With the MVVM Lite implementation, we actually had Laurent look at it, and he's like, this is, almost exactly like one of my templates, and that was like one of my happiest moments. Same thing with Prism with Brian Lagunas going, like, this is what Prism should look like, and then that's how we know we've succeeded. When we handed this off to the MVPs for testing, before we did a public release, the worst issue they found with our code generation was we forgot a line break in one of the generated files. So the code-wise was was basically, we were doing that was one of two issues that an MVP found. That made me happy when that's the type of issues that people are finding, is semantic issues, not hardcore generated code as crap issues. So, and that was a single line fix, just literally hitting enter, checking that in, recompiling it, and then everyone that was testing it instantly got those fixes as well. Cool. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Does Windows Center Studio support creating multi-instance app?
Wait, pardon?
Multi-instance app.
Multi-instance, yes.
It's possible to create with Windows Center Studio, include the feature that enable this?
We currently don't. We support the current release and the release prior. So because multi-instance right now does not work in Fall Creators Update, we will not implement that feature. We will implement it come the fall when RS5 is released. Does that make sense? One of the things we're kind of questioning is if a feature can go fall back, to like, let's say, RS2, should we dynamically determine what our min and max are? So if you wanted to, let's say, pick multi-instance, your min has to go crank all the way up, and then you add in the appropriate robustness if you choose to. Like, this is one of our open-ended questions versus just sticking to the current release and the release prior. That way, if you do want to go further back, you can. Or maybe we throw up an error and say, like, hey, you picked a feature that needs the latest release. Please make sure your application is robust enough so it doesn't blow up when a user hits it on Creators Update or Anniversary Update, something like that. Also, when the WinUI library comes out, officially we will migrate any control that is in that package to that control, because that is one of our biggest issues is like the navigation view. Because the navigation view is added in Fall Creators Update, that means you need Fall Creators Update. So it falls into right now the N and N-1 support window. But now we can go further back, I think, with almost all our features in time, and just do API wrapper contracts for everything else. So we can be a lot more clever now that we're not beholden to user controls with that single NuGet package when that gets released. Does that make sense? Cool. Any other questions? Let's go see where the scripts are. It's still installing Visual Studio. Here's actually a question for the install scripts. Would you guys want Visual Studio Code installed by default? Visual Studio Code by default. Do you know what Visual Studio Code is, sir? Let me enlighten you. Visual Studio Code is an open source IDE, and let me go, sure, don't install this. It's really good for, I would say, webby style projects. You can do a lot of scripting. There's tons of extensions for it. It's been out, I think, for 2-ish years now. For like Markdown and a bunch of other things, it has quickly become my go-to editor for things like that. So, if you haven't tried it and you do web development, highly suggest you check it out. It's free, it's open source. It's worth 15 minutes of your time just to see if you like it. Cool. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm here if you guys have additional questions. Let's go to the, I think there's beer. Yeah, there's beer. Beer time. Cool.